And we have returned to Smells Like 90s Rock with our special this week, Sounds Like 90s Rock, Part 2, 90s covers of classics. And we have played some pretty good ones thus far. Before we went to break, you heard Pearl Jam doing J. Frank Wilson and the Cavaliers' song, Last Kiss. You've also heard the Flaming Lips doing John Lennon's Nobody Told Me, Metallica covering Bob Seger's Turn the Page, Oasis doing The Who's My Generation, and probably my favorite one of the list, Nirvana covering David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. Now, it's really unique that we do that song this week because earlier this month, we introduced a new segment here on WUTK, Volunteer Radio, 90.3 The Rock, called Fashion Pop. And it's a weekly series hosted by the owner and operator of Planet Exchange, Beth Boleen. And it's really, really informative and really interesting. Last week's story had to do with denim, cowboys wearing a certain type of pants, and it was really funny. But this past week's episode, this past Thursday, you can catch it, by the way, every week, every Thursday at 3:40 p.m. It was all about Nirvana and their now historic performance on MTV Unplugged. And it was just all about him. It was all about Kurt Cobain and a sweater that he wore on the air on that show. And as a matter of fact, the song we always end the Fashion Pop segment with a song, and we ended Fashion Pop this week with the unplugged version of Nirvana's The Man Who Sold the World. And it was just, when I was putting that together, I thought, oh, well, that's crazy because we're going to be doing that song this week on the 90s covers episode. So, you know, it was really interesting and really, and I love this segment. It's a real fun segment to do. And since I'm riding solo tonight, I thought, why not? Let's play back this awesome segment all about Nirvana on this week's Fashion Pop. So now we'll throw it over to Beth Boleen, owner and operator of Planet Exchange, for the Nirvana version of Fashion Pop. It's time to find out what happens when fashion and pop culture collide. It's time for Fashion Pop, sponsored by Planet Exchange, Knoxville's go-to for fashionable finds, located in the Gallery Shopping Center. Here's Planet Exchange owner Beth Boleen.
So, you're in a thrift store, and you come across a vintage men's sweater. Nothing special. The kind your grandpa might have worn while puffing his pipe and tossing you on his knee, whistling some random Roger Miller song. It takes you back to a simpler time, so naturally, your next thought is, how can I turn this $4 purchase into something worth 6 figures someday? I know. I'll spill something on it and stain the front right pocket. Then I'll fall asleep one night with a cigarette hanging from my lips and burn a hole in it. I won't even bother trying to replace the missing button. After all, it worked for Nirvana's frontman Kurt Cobain. Worn in 1993 during MTV's Unplugged, the vintage Manhattan brand acrylic mohair blend cardigan worn by Cobain sold for more than $100,000. $137,500 to be exact. Even the average price of a home was less than that, by about 10 grand. Listed by Julian's Live, Auction to the Stars, Lot 228 sold to the highest bidder in the 2015 Icons and Idols of Rock and Roll auction. When you think about it, it kind of makes the Sonic Youth t-shirt he wore during his last live performance a steal at just $25,000. This is Beth Boleen with this week's Fashion Pop.
You've been listening to Fashion Pop, where fashion and pop collide. Sponsored by Planet Exchange in the Gallery Shopping Center and hosted by Planet Exchange owner Beth Boleen. Tune in every Thursday afternoon at 3:40 for Fashion Pop, only on 90.3 The Rock, Knoxville's musical tastemakers for over 30 years.
Hey Knoxville, this is WUTK News Director and fashionista Sophie Grossroad, and here's this week's Fashion Pop Cool Tune Tie-In. In his journals, Kurt Cobain ranked the album The Man Who Sold the World at number 45 in his top 50 favorite albums. A live rendition of the song was recorded by Nirvana in 1993 during their MTV Unplugged appearance, and it was released on their MTV Unplugged in New York album the following year. The song was also released as a promotional single for the album and received considerable airplay on alternative rock radio stations like WUTK. It was also thrown into heavy rotation on music video stations such as MTV. Nirvana regularly covered the song during live sets after their memorable acoustic performance up until lead singer Cobain's death in 1994. In 2002, the song was re-released on Nirvana's Best Of compilation album, Nirvana. Bowie said of Nirvana's cover, "I was simply blown away when I found out that Kurt Cobain liked my work, and have always wanted to talk to him about his reasons for covering The Man Who Sold the World. and that it was a very good, straightforward rendition and sounded somehow very honest. It would have been nice to have worked with him, but just talking with him would have been real cool. Bowie called Nirvana's cover heartfelt, noting that until this cover, it hadn't occurred to me that I was part of America's musical landscape. I always felt my weight in Europe, but not in the U.S. In the wake of its release, Bowie bemoaned the fact that when he performed the number himself, he would encounter kids that come up afterwards and say, "It's cool you're doing a Nirvana song," and I think, F you, you little tosser. On February 14, 2016, surviving Nirvana band members Chris Novoselic, Dave Grohl, and Pat Smear teamed up with Beck to perform The Man Who Sold the World at a pre-Grammy Awards party in tribute to Bowie, with Beck performing the vocals. So, from the 1994 MTV Unplugged album, here's Nirvana's cover of The Man Who Sold the World.